and get started in the meantime. So my name is Bill Cavanaugh. I am the director of the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology at DePaul. It's a research center about the Catholic Church in the Global South, which was founded in 2008, and I became director in 2013. And every year we have a conference called World Catholicism Week, which is actually, used to be a week and now it's a weekend, which made it easier for people to come when it was in person. We've had it online for the last couple of years for obvious reasons. But every year we gather people from around the world to talk about one particular topic. And this year the topic is youth and young people in the church. That's called the Church of Now, recognizing that young people are not just the future of the church, they're the now of the church. And so asking about how we can empower young people. And so we've got scholars and activists from Lebanon, Indonesia, Nigeria, India, Brazil, Burundi, Central African Republic, China, Mexico, the Philippines, Uganda, and the United States, addressing questions of discernment, faith formation, trauma, sustainable development, and young people's leadership in the church. So we started this poster session with undergraduates a few years ago as a way to get undergraduates involved in what is basically a research center. And it's always been a wonderful event. We, of course, would love to be having it in person. Usually the students put up their posters, people go around talking to the students about their posters and looking, and then the three respondents respond, and then we all have dinner together, which is all nice. But that's not going to happen on Zoom, unfortunately, but we'll do the best that we can. And the subject matter that I've asked the students, usually I ask the students to research the same topic as World Catholicism Week. And so last year it was healthcare and the Catholic Church in the Global South. This year, I just could not find enough academic materials on youth and young people in the Catholic Church in the Global South. And so the youth component is the students themselves to this session, and I've asked them to either address questions of violence and nonviolence or questions of economic sustainability. So that's why a little bit of a difference this year. So let me introduce our three respondents, and then we'll let them address the students directly. So Hosffman Ospino is chair of religious education and pastoral ministry at Boston College and is the president of the Academy of Catholic Hispanic Theologians of the United States. Currently, he's working on a national study on how Hispanic Catholics discern vocation to ecclesial ministry, and he's done a couple of national studies on Catholic ministry with Hispanic youth and Latino leaders. He has authored and edited too many books to mention, 15 books, 150 essays. So welcome, Hosffman.
Thank you, Bill.
It's great to have you here. So Flora Pasquereau, clinical psychologist for victims of violent conflict, who splits her time between her native Bangui in the Central African Republic and Toronto, and she works for the UN Special Criminal Court. She's a mother of three. She identifies with many continents, speaks many languages. She's completed her studies in France. She's a teacher, a registered psychotherapist, a family mediator, and her main work with the Special Criminal Court of the United Nations is to accompany victims victims, witnesses, and also alleged perpetrators of acts related to armed conflicts and dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is rampant in many of these environments. She also founded a mental health NGO in the Central African Republic called Obuni, which means in the local Mbaka language, no matter what, we will succeed. And that says a lot about her attitude. When she was asked how she juggles and deals with all that she does, their different roles, she says, God is in control, so the sky is the limit. So welcome, Flora.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And our final respondent is Chiaretto Yan, who is professor at the National Catholic Seminary of Beijing in China, and a visiting professor at the University of St. Joseph in Macau, and is currently, as I understand it, trapped in Hong Kong because of shutdowns in China, and has been there for the last couple of months, I believe. He's a research fellow at Sofia University Institute in Italy. He has a doctorate from the Gregorian University in Rome, an MA in Oriental Religions and Cultures from the University of Santo Tomas in Manila in the Philippines, and he's the author of several books as well. So welcome to you, Chiaretto.
Glad to be here, everybody. Hi.
Awesome. So each of our respondents will address 2 or 3 students with 5 minutes per student to make some appreciative comments about various aspects of their work, make some connections to their own context or their own knowledge of the subject matter, and then maybe ask an open-ended question of the students after that. So Hosffman, why don't you go ahead and start?
Absolutely. So which paper do you want me to begin with?
You can start with any one of the 3 that you're doing.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, so let me begin with Bernardo's paper on the dynamics in Chile, and the question of torture, the movement against torture in Chile. And I think that, Bernardo, thank you very much for writing this poster, for putting it together. Something that I wanted to highlight from this movement or from this paper is the fact that you are highlighting an issue that is not actually something of the past, but it's very commonplace. It happens regularly still in many parts of Latin America. I was born in Colombia, as a matter of fact, in South America, and growing up experienced, an undeclared civil war, a civil war that actually was born out of a time of political turmoil, political parties against one another, and they used torture, as a matter of fact, to either undermine their opponents, or simply to make statements. We still see in Colombia, as a matter of fact, and with guerrilla groups or with the narcos, and this is something that we also see in Mexico, and we see in other parts of Latin America, especially gang activity in Central America, that the use of torture, remains very much alive. And your paper, in many ways, is an invitation for Roman Catholics, to ask, how do we stand before those dynamics? I'm thinking, for instance, of the movement, in northern Mexico and in other parts of Central America against femicide, where women are being killed just for being women, for the sake of being women. And this is violence against women. And once again, the question is, how do we as Roman Catholics emerge or stand up before this dynamic? Thank you for raising the story of Sebastian Acevedo and the question of nonviolence, the response of nonviolence. You highlight something that I found fascinating and that still remains a question mark for the Catholic Church institutionally, and that is, the institution tends to respond slowly to questions of social injustice on a regular basis. And one of the reasons, and we have seen this not only in Latin America, we have seen it also in other parts of the world, is because of it. Sometimes the close association of the institutional church with political powers or with financial powers or with the elites, no? So what you highlighted in this case with about Sebastian Acevedo and the nonviolent movement against torture is the power of the grassroots. I think that just fascinating, no? The power of the grassroots taking the initiative and in some ways forcing the institution to respond, to say something, to take a stance, and eventually the institution responds. And I think that that's exactly something that I wanna, the biggest takeaway for me from these nonviolent movements that are mostly lay-led, that are guided by people who have skin in the game. Their children are being taken off or are being tortured. Their spouses, their friends, their relatives, their neighbors. And people cannot wait for a bishop or cannot wait for a theologian or for an institution to respond. They have to do it on their own. And the fact that they choose to do it non-violently is just fascinating. And I got a question for you, Bernardo. Right now, I mean, torture is definitely one of the questions that, perhaps living in the United States of America, we don't see, torture happening in our nation, at least visibly. We don't know of instances, although it's likely that it's happening. But what I'm wondering is, we in the United States, as citizens of not only this nation, but of the world, we are aware of torture happening in Asia, in Africa, in right now, what's happening in the Ukraine should really be a wake-up call for all of us, or in Latin America. What do you think, we as Catholics and young people, in your particular case, and those here in this conference, should be doing to raise awareness about torture in the world?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think we could take an example like from the Sebastian Acevedo movement, like make like public statements, public symbols, get the word out there, like make it known, basically, like especially because you said like people, especially young people, they have, like how you said, skin in the game, right? It directly affects them. So making it known to the world just what kind of things are going on, like not having it be something that is maybe happening in another place, putting it in front of people. I think that's kind of like when, like an answer. Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. And the only thing that I would add is young people today have a powerful medium to do this, and it's social media, something that some of us who are on the older side, we tend to shy away from using social media a little bit, but you guys are, you were born into this, and that is a really a good way, a medium to raise your voices. Thank you for that paper and the poster.
Flora, do you want to address one of your students? Maybe we'll go around, we'll go Hosffman, Flora, Chiaretto, and then we'll go around again that way.
Yeah, sure. So we start with Juliet. Okay, so thank you, Juliet. I'll put the poster in front of me. I read your work and I listened to you also, and I find it very, very interesting. How you are very focused and interesting about the Boko Haram in Nigeria. And when I read it, I could compare it literally what was happened in Central African Republic, because it was some war over there and people were thinking that it was a fight between Christianity against Muslim or Muslim against Christians. And then when I was reading it, I was wondering about, I say, three things. First of all, when you talk about the non-violence through scripture, when you talk about Matthew chapter 10, verses 22, sorry for my accent, Romans, and also Romans 12:14, and yes, to Romans 12:14. And I was thinking that how in these particular things, young people can forgive when you see your brother and be killed by another people. This is very powerful. How I can forgive. How I can say this is happening. So when I take this one, I will compare to what's happened in Rwanda in 1994. I don't even was aware about that. When there was a war between Hutu and Tutsi. And then with the actual head of state, they said we need to forgive. So we create, like you say, I would say in French, l'association des victimes, to talk about, like between different culture, how we can address this and how we can not develop like hatred between one party to another party. So in this particular thing, I say, when you were working on Boko Haram, meaning we forbidden all the culture, Occidental culture, how you can think about, because I know that you are young, what's happening in Africa is the other culture, other country as Central African Republic and Rwanda, and what's happening also in United States. How we can compare this, like, we say hatred between some different races and also different religion. How we can address that? What do you think about what's happening actually in United States? If my English has been understandable.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, that was definitely one of the most interesting parts of my research, in my opinion, is how like this whole non-violence through scripture, how people in Nigeria were turning to the Bible as a main source for, their emancipation, their salvation. But yeah, I think that's really interesting, the point you're bringing up about how that compares to also things that are happening in the US. Like, I know, like in the US, obviously, we don't have terrorist groups like this that are constantly, attacking us. But I think there's definitely other things that are happening in the US that are obviously bad, like racial injustice, stuff like that. So I think, yeah, definitely in any situation, turning to the scriptures is a good source of forgiveness and salvation.
Okay. And for the last question, I'm sorry, I pushed you some time, sorry, because I'm sure also I push you. How, if you think like this, like maybe wider, when a young people, because my essay tomorrow we talk about like trauma, right? Violence and the young, and how you can go over, you can pass this trauma, and what is the role of the church, the Catholicism and the other religion. So your point of view, when you have a young people in front of you, say, yes, the Bible says forgive. Tell me how I can forgive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely very hard. Honestly, when I first researched this, I was like, what? Like, how can people like see all this violence? They see, their loved ones dying violently. They see everything that's happening around them. I'm like, how? It was hard for me to wrap my mind around like how people can forgive and like turn to God in that sense and say, I'm giving everything to God, like he'll handle it. I just have to forgive. So yeah, honestly, when I was researching that, it was pretty shocking at first. But yeah, definitely a new outlook for me, at least.
Okay. And the last things for you, because I like what you was like writing. Think about, if I may say that, about the law and the faith.
About law and faith.
Yes.
That is very interesting because
right? You have the law and the faith.
I usually never think about law and faith as being together. Usually they're very separate, like in a secular society. But yeah, I don't know. I've never really thought about them meshed together. But also in my research, I read a little bit about how a lot of like people in Nigeria who are advocating for using scripture as a means of being emancipated, they're saying that like a possible solution to help eradicate Boko Haram could be electing political leaders who are turning to the Bible as well to make policies that are rooted in God's word. So I thought that was something that was really interesting, how like electing leaders that are Christians could help change the situation.
Yeah, that's what I say, is the law in the Bible and the faith.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's got like the context, the law and the faith.
Mm-hmm.
So congratulations, good job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Sorry, thank you, Flora. We have a request from Juan, if he could go next, because I think he's got an issue with his job and may need to leave soon. So I can't remember who was responding to Juan.
I am responding to Juan.
Oh, okay. So,
okay, so let me get back and Juan. So thank you again for your paper, your poster. You know, I'm grading papers these days, and so I have the word paper in my head. You know, for your poster, and you have definitely brought up to our attention a very interesting topic, which is liberation theology, and the influence of liberation theology in the context of Chiapas. There are two things that with which I want to begin my remarks or my reactions to your paper. Latin America, and again, as well as many other parts of the world, unfortunately, our geographical, socio-cultural contexts that have experienced major pain, major situations of injustice. And what's interesting is that much of the injustice that has been actually inflicted upon the people of Latin America has been inflicted by people of faith themselves, you see? And by this is Christians inflicting pain and oppression and injustice upon other fellow Christians and other people. So much of the liberation theology movement in Latin America emerges out of self-reflection. I remember, for instance, having a conversation with Gustavo Gutierrez, who used, I asked him, how did the movement begin in Latin America? How did you guys begin to talk about these issues? And Gustavo, I remember telling me, we began to assess ourselves, how we were treating each other as Catholics in a mostly Catholic continent, how we were treating each other. And then at the time of being silent, whether institutionally or at the grassroots level, how Christians, and particularly Catholics in the continent, became complicit with situations of oppression and injustice. Well, your poster in many ways points to some of this dynamic, and you bring up the experience of Bishop Samuel Ruiz in Chiapas, Samuel Ruiz who actually arrives in Chiapas as a traditional bishop, and as I was reading the poster and the experience of Samuel Ruiz, I was also thinking about Oscar Romero, who also comes to San Salvador as a very traditional, very ecclesial oriented, institutionally oriented bishop. They are there not to cause havoc, not to get things or lead people into revolutions or anything. They are men who are serving the institution and want to make sure that the institution continues to thrive. But the moment they start doing this self-reflection, when they start seeing the pain of the people and how people are oppressed and so on, then there is a change of heart, And that's what Pope Francis these days, as a matter of fact, is telling the church that needs to happen, that there cannot be societal or cultural transformation or structural transformation unless there is a movement of the heart, unless there is conversion of the heart. And actually, Pope Francis puts it in a beautiful way. Conversion of the heart leads to conversion of the mind or conversion of minds. And then this conversion of mind leads to conversion of structures, ecclesial and societal. So liberation theology, we call it liberation theology. To be honest with you, I just call it gospel, It is the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the gospel of Jesus Christ is liberating. And you show us in your poster, the example of someone who, in listening to the cries of the people, to seeing people actually struggling because of the injustices of society and the powerful and the elites, particularly the indigenous communities of Chiapas, then he becomes an organizer. He becomes someone who, Samuel Ruiz, as a matter of fact, starts embracing a new way of living the gospel, in Latin America, in a way that leads to justice. So when the people see Samuel Ruiz, or when the people see that the gospel is not just something that we do in churches, that the gospel is not something that we just have for personal pleasure or for personal growth, but it's something that inspires transformation. This is where we see these grassroots movements like Las Abejas that you talk about, which thank you for raising that point on Las Abejas, because I think that, when people are fed up with injustice, people explode, people wanna react, and it's normal. It is normal to react to injustice. It is normal to react to what is not right. And there are two ways in your poster, you present two ways. One, there could be violence, a recourse to violence, but on the other, there is a recourse to raising your voice, yet doing it in a pacifist way. So there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of potential for liberation theology. And the question that I have for you is, the United States of America is contending once again, this is a vicious cycle in our society, contending with racism, and we see movements like Black Lives Matter, and we see movements that are in favor of immigrants and the just treatment of immigrants and so on. So the question that I have for you is, how do you see young people that know your age, your cohort these days engaging in light of the gospel in these liberationist movements?
Well, yeah, I agree that I feel that like my generation has had more of a feeling of, being fed up with the injustices of, just not just this country, but other world events. And well, I do think there's a little bit of I guess appreciation of more violent past movements, maybe like Black Panthers and groups like that, and the Zapatitas, like I mentioned in my poster. But I do think that our generation wants to move more peacefully, because I do think that historically more peaceful movements and protests have yielded more progress, like we talked in our class, the nonviolent protesting. I think the Philippines in the 80s that was very revolutionary. Or just famously MLK and Gandhi.
Mhm.
So yeah, I do think that more peaceful movements are the best way to go to change, bring progress.
Very good. Well, thank you, Juan. Excellent poster, and please keep thinking about these matters, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Juan, and thank you, Hosffman. I'm especially appreciative that the names Gustavo Gutierrez and Oscar Romero came up during the conversation, because we read both of them in our class. So let's move to Chiaretto. We've got about 28 minutes left. So Chiaretto, if you would like to address one of your...
Sure. So I start with Kelly, the post on how Las Casas argument go against the interests of the Spanish crown. There was this famous debate of whether Spain should wage war against the indigenous South Americans in the New World. There were these two sides. One is from Juan, two Spaniards. He said he make use of this natural law concept of Aristotle, saying that the Aborigines were having human sacrifices, so it go against natural law, killing human persons, while the Las Casas argument rely more on the Christian concept that all people are born and raised in the image of God, and the Aborigines were not doing anything against the Spanish colonizer. Of course, looking from the present-day perspective, it was quite clear, but at that moment, quite clear that there was vested interest from the Spanish crown. And I think Kelly has very well put up this dependency theory, which is core interest of the Spaniards were to have resources flow from the periphery to the core of the wealthy states in Europe. And yeah, I think the post is well documented with footnotes. It was also well contextualized. And so, yeah, it brings up the issue of nowadays. There was a certain justification of the self-interest of the rich countries to get resources from the developing countries, and in the name of evangelization, converting the Aborigines. But it's interesting that also Kelly put the background that the Las Casas was a landowner who became a friar, who became a Dominican priest. And his position is very, very valid, therefore, because he has experiences from both sides, of the colonizer and the colonized. And I think there's a very contemporary relevance, especially looking at Asia, which is where I come from, and we have these famous names, such as Matteo Ricci in China, Roberto De Nobili in India, and Jose de Acosta. These Jesuits were pioneers of enculturation, especially in Asia, where there is a strong cultural roots. But at the same time, in South America, we have also pioneers like Las Casas, who is not a Jesuit, who is a Dominican, and also Franciscan like Bernardino de Seguin. So it really brings up the issue not only of enculturation, which is very relevant in this part of the world, if we talk about evangelization. But the issue is very relevant also for the developed countries to make us reflect on a couple of questions that I would like to raise to Kelly now. First, how has doing this work changed the way you think about the relationship between developed countries of North America, like in the US and also Europe, the relations between developed countries and developed countries like South America, Africa, and Asia? So how has doing this research changed the way of the way you think about this relationship?
Yeah, so the reason that I wanted to do something that involved dependency theory is because in my major I've seen like so many examples of like these very wealthy nations, I guess taking resources from less, like I believe peripheral nations, less wealthy nations, and then essentially like using those resources to make money and et cetera, et cetera. So I think, I don't know that it really made me change the way that I thought. It more so gave me like a historical perspective, thinking of like, oh, this has been around for a very long time. And it sort of got me thinking more about like other times in history where we've seen the dependency theory like work.
Mm-hmm. And another quick question, very relevant to the US, because it has to do, this justification has to do with religion and politics and economy, And so my second question is, what do you think in the US context, in politics, do you make use of religious issues like whether Biden should be given the permission to take a communion in mass, Catholic mass, or why on the other side this debate, the hardcore conservatives, how they see, making use of theological issues actually for political or economic interests.
Can you clarify that? Sorry, I got some of that, but not all of it.
I think in US politics, you make use, very often politicians are using religious issues, whether, say, I was saying, Biden should be permitted to take communion since he's on for abortion, and actually there are certain positions that the core interest is more on politics, not on election and on economic interest, rather than theological or religious issues. So what do you think about that?
That's kind of a tough question for me. I remember we had read something in class. So growing up, I had always been very keen on like separation of church and state, and I still believe that way, and feel that way. But we had read something in class, and I cannot remember what it was, but it sort of made me readjust my thinking of like, oh, I guess like in some ways this could work. But anyways, I think, you know, at least like the way it is in America, separation of church and state is important because oh gosh, I had it in my head. Because not everyone believes the same thing, and so it can put like a lot of people like in a position where they have to do things that don't align with their personal morals or the things that they believe. So yeah, I hope that made sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. And it's very thought-provoking. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kelly, and thanks, Chiaretto. Again, Kelly, you might be thinking of some of the readings from Philip Jenkins' book, where he just kind of talks about how, you know, in a lot of places, it's not easy to separate religion and politics, because if you believe in God, then you believe that God has to do with all parts of life and so on. So in some ways, the separation is the different thing, and it's more common to have kind of the two intermingle. Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Chiaretto, for bringing up another couple of things that we looked at in class was Robert Nobili and Matteo Ricci. We studied them as well. So this is a nice little kind of class reunion of some of the key figures we've looked at. So there's three left. Flora, I'm going to go back to you. I want to be respectful of everybody's time here. So if we could kind of keep things closer to 5 rather than 10 minutes. I don't want to cut anybody short. And if everybody's okay going a little bit past 8 o'clock, then I think that's fine. But I do want to just be respectful of people's time. So Flora, take it away.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm going back to Rafal. He's here. I cannot see him. Oh, yes. Hi. So I read your poster, very interesting. There are many things I didn't know. So French say félicitations, congratulations. And I feel with your story that you are very involved about what's happened in Poland. And so when I see like the title, the church, the pope, and the clergy, I was wondering, the church, the pope. So which comes first, the church or the pope? And what about the clergy? And I was thinking about when I was young, and I'm still young, so saying how the history of Poland, because we talk about like the movement can be separate or not be a confusion between politics and I mean separation between the church and the state, as the young lady saying earlier, the difference between the church, I mean, not involve the church and with the politics. But when I read it, I say how the church cannot be, or how the church can be separate for the politics. So I find this very interesting because from my understanding, you are very involved as a, like, not as a movement, but about what's happening with the solidarity. I mean, the solidarity. And I say when the Pope, because the Pope was for the democracy, John Paul II in the democracy. And I always remember 6 years ago, if I don't mistaken, the Pope Francis went to Central African Republic when there was like very big like war between like the movement Christian and Muslim. And once he gets there, everybody, so this like at this time there was not discrimination. Everybody was happy that the Pope Francis went to car because he was like I mean, it's bring the God parole and he will resolve all the problem, and it's happened, right? So I say the history of the Catholicism or the Pope is very I can say influence the state once people want democracy. it doesn't work when some states that then think the democracy as Western people or us here in Occidental countries think when they compare what's happening in Afghanistan. So I will say like the comparison between, I mean, not the comparison, but the church cannot be separate from the politics, and this is what I read on your poster. And also the influence of the Pope is, I can see it in the Congo, Kinshasa, like the DRC, when something happened with the politic and you have a big influence with the clergy, the big influence from the clergy about what has happened in the country. So just to cut it short, because I don't want to take too much time, I find your poster very interesting. And also I have a question for you. Do we think that the clergy or the Pope, when you see what's happening in the world, have to be in the politics, or how we can see the difference? How the clergy can work on the country without being in politics? Hopefully my question was too hard for you, but yes.
Before I answer that, one of the biggest takeaways I took from the class from Dr. Kavanaugh was that there's a difference between separation of church and state and religion and politics. So I believe that priests, especially the ones that we see every Sunday, I think they do have some sort of a role that they can play in helping people out, whether it be through just giving practical advice or giving spiritual advice, given that hope, being that, not to sound silly or corny, but being this like beacon of hope that things will get better. I think they do play a pretty big role. And then whenever there's need for intervention, they could, a lot of priests, there's historical examples, there's current examples, they can play as mediators between the local or federal, state governments and the people that are being hurt by those governments. So I do think the clergy and the church can play a big part in all those issues.
Okay,
That's great. Thank you.
thank you.
Well, and thanks, Flora. This is a really interesting follow-up to the conversation we just had with Chiaretto and Kelly too, where this question came up. And that was one of the things that we talked about. Thank you, Ralph, for encapsulating that so well, that church and state separation is not the same as separating religion and politics. And you often find that the definition of what church involvement in politics is changes a lot, right? Everybody was really happy when Pope John Paul II got involved in Polish politics, right? And then when Pope John Paul II spoke out on other things, the same people would say, oh, you need to stay out of politics, right? Everybody wants the church to be involved on their side of political issues. But then when it's the other side, then it's like, no, you got to stay out of politics. Thank you. So let's go back to Chiaretto. And you would address, is it Kira? I think Kira's. You need to unmute, Chiaretto.
So, Pierre, are you of Filipino descent?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I so happened to be in the Philippines taking my master's in 1986, when there was this People's Power Revolution at the EDSA. Were you born yet at that time?
No,
you were not born.
So I'm actually second generation.
Oh, okay.
Which is very uncommon, especially in Chicago. But my grandparents, they lived through the People Power Revolution. So this was very special to me to.
Wow, your grandparents. So it's 2 generations back. So I think your presentation is very nice. It's a glorious moment of the Filipinos because they're proud of this moment of peaceful revolution, no? Bringing down the dictatorship of Marcos without any bloodshed. And you have also presented 2 arguments very well balanced from 2 Filipino scholars. No one saying that the role of the church was very timely, important, no, in that people's power revolution. And another side of story you also brought up is that also it has not always been the case. There's also occasions of corruption, briberies, and the church sometimes are selective in certain arguments, no, and sometimes would not go against these cases of corruption or violence in some cases. So it's well balanced, your arguments. And it made me think of, again, the relationship between religion and politics, no, in the Chinese context, no, where it's more of a Confucian culture, Asian values, and there are not only the Christian religion. There are, for example, in China, there are 5 official religions with Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Catholicism, and Protestantism. And so there's difference between Asian values and Western values. I think there are similarities and differences. For example, we Asians would not talk too much in public, of sex abuse of clergy, or homosexuality, or abortions, these kind of issues. While, you have mentioned that, for very much part of history that Asian has been was colonized, no? So somehow church issues is still very much on this kind of issues, no? Even in Rome, no, kind of have to defend on these issues. But Pope Francis is very much of another approach, a pastoral approach. So, so in Asia, I think we emphasize more on dialogue, interreligious dialogue, and dialogue with the poor, with the periphery, and with culture and with religions. So going back to you as Asian, no? So you must have lived with this multiple identity, as Asian and living in the US, and how would you consider these 2 aspects, of Asian values and also of these issues on too much emphasis on maybe in the US or playing up on abortion issues and gay union issues, no? How would you say, that can it, again, coming back to that question, not being instrumentalized by interest groups or politicians on these kind of issues?
Yeah, so obviously I'm Filipino and I'm a woman, and there's a lot of Christian morals that are going to conflict with my my lens of the world and how I live through the United States or just the rest of the world. And I think it's important that Christianity changes in the way that society also changes over time. And that way it not only is a little bit more palatable to the younger generation, but then it can bring people together as well. Because like in the people power revolution, there's people that were coming from different classes because of the wealth unequal wealth distribution. There's women coming together, there's men, and in order to have them all become one, they all needed to gather their own Christian morals under the same foundation. And so I think that to practice Christianity while identifying with different identities, Christianity can't be practiced the same way it was practiced in like the early 1900s. I think it needs to adjust to a more modern type of Christianity.
Good. I happened to be in the US for the first time last August. I was really impressed of this multicultural context of the US. So very good. US Asian Christians, you can make a lot of contributions there.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Kira. Thank you, Kiereto. Hosffman and Anna, you're the last ones up.
There you have it. So we know the last, the best for last here. Anna, thank you very much for your poster on the anti-mining movement in El Salvador. First of all, very well researched poster. It's amazing how much you could, you shared in this poster. Just a lot of information, key information in a few words, and that's well put. I didn't know that El Salvador actually in 2017 had signed this anti-mining agreement, banning mining, and that's amazing. And the first reaction that I had when I was reading your poster was, how come we did not celebrate that in the United States of America? How come we didn't hear much about it? It didn't become a big issue. So mining. Major problem in Latin America, in Africa, and Asia, other parts of the world. And I think that you just put the finger, in a major wound that we have as humanity, pointing to the remnants of colonialism, in which we got first world nations or kind of assuming the right, or taken for granted the so-called right to go and exploit the lands, and the people in other parts of the world. So I think that your poster raises in me, the idea of thinking about two relationships. On the one hand, mining, we know how it affects people who are involved in mining, questions of exploitation, the questions of how we destroy sources of clean water, how we actually enrich some people while others remain poor and poor. So that relationship among people gets raised in this anti-mining movement that you have highlighted. But I was also taken by the other type of relationship that for Roman Catholics, and I'm glad that you mentioned the last three popes being mindful about this, is our relationship to the created order, And it is something that we sometimes simply take for granted. But it is also our poor theological reading of Genesis that has led us, as a matter of fact, to the exploitation of the environment, just to simply say, we are going to mine for the sake of mining, for the sake of profit, for the sake of making more money, and so on. And it's profitable and we can do it. And then, we forget about the damage, and sometimes irreparable damage that we are doing to the environment. So my takeaway from your poster is that being a Roman Catholic, and I'm glad that young people actually, a lot of the people who are in the anti-mining movements in Latin America that I have known about are actually young people, are people in their late teens and early 20s. Why? Because, and especially many of the males are forced to work in those mines, and they want to react to that. No, one of the questions that always stays in my mind when I think about the mining movements or the mining practices that we have in the in Latin America, Africa, Asia, is the fact that most or many of the most powerful mining companies are actually from North America and Europe. So we buy the diamonds, we buy the oil, we buy the gold, we buy everything that is mined, I mean, our phones, our computers, our electricity, so many things are actually fueled, and sustained by what is mined somewhere else, but we seldom have awareness about the effects of mining. So the fact that El Salvador was able to do this, it's a small country, and and the Catholic Church got involved, but it's a good example. So the one question that I had for you, Anna, is very straightforward. To what extent, did writing this poster or researching for this poster affect your own understanding or your own relationship to the created order, to the environment?
I think it opened up how important it is to take care of the environment now, because it's only going to last so long if we keep going the direction we were going. And that was shown in the presentation, is that El Salvador is so restricting our resources right now because of overexploitation of their resources. They only have so much water left, and then more mining was putting a stress on that. And I think that's my research kind of pointed out the fact that we only have so much time left, and if we don't act now, then it's going to be too late.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well researched, well done. Congratulations, Hannah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for participating here. I want to thank our guests, Hosffman, Chiaretto, and Flora. Flora, especially for tuning in after getting off of the long flights. But you were terrific. Thank you for your feedback. I mostly want to put the spotlight on the students, though, because you've been terrific. And let's give the students an applause. Give yourselves an applause. You've been great all quarter long when in class. I really enjoyed your work there as well. So thank you for that. And this session, I think, brings together a couple of it brings together the question of youth that you students have really come across with strong voices in this, and that's part of what we're trying to lift up in this conference that begins with this session tonight, and it's going to run through Sunday night. But also just the worldwide embrace. As I said in class, the Catholic Church is the first truly global organization, and still the only truly global grassroots organization in the world. And it has many problems, but one of the things that it holds up is a certain sort of hope that we can bridge our differences amongst cultures and look at it, as Shusaku Endo said, as a symphony. Look at humanity as a symphony in which every kind of people has a note to play. And I think you've all brought that together here really well. So from all four corners of the globe. So thank you all, and tune into the conference if you can. And we'll bid you a good night. Flora, go get some sleep.
Yes. A few minutes.
Awesome. Great.
Yes, we're ready
Thanks,
for
everybody.
tomorrow. Thank you. God bless you.
Everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Au revoir. Au revoir.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Good night. Bye. Bye.